The glass tipped, water splashing down her dress, soaking through as the waitress smirked. She was pregnant, tired, and just wanted a quiet meal. But instead, she was humiliated in front of the whole restaurant. The waitress thought she could laugh, roll her eyes, and dump water on a woman whose skin she didn't like. But what she didn't know was who she had just disrespected. Stay with me until the end, because what happened next will shock you. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get into it. It was 9:15 on a Thursday evening when Maria Santos walked into Bellecourt, one of the most exclusive restaurants in downtown Chicago. The maitre d' glanced up from his reservation book, his practiced smile faltering for just a moment as he took in her appearance. Dark skin, designer dress that couldn't hide her 7-month pregnancy, jewelry that sparkled under the crystal chandeliers. She moved with quiet confidence, her hand resting protectively on her rounded belly. What nobody in that restaurant knew was that Maria Santos was married to Vincent Santos, a man whose name carried weight in circles most people never even knew existed. Vincent had built an empire through construction, real estate, and other ventures that kept his family living in luxury. But there were whispers about deeper connections, late-night phone calls, and business associates who spoke in careful code. Maria had specifically chosen this restaurant because Vincent was flying back from Miami that night, and she wanted to surprise him with dinner at the place where they'd had their first date 3 years ago. She'd made the reservation under her maiden name, wanting to keep things simple and avoid any unnecessary attention. The hostess led her to a corner table, the same one where Vincent had first told her he loved her. Maria settled into her chair, wincing slightly as the baby kicked. She checked her phone. Vincent's flight was delayed by an hour. Perfect time to relax and enjoy a quiet meal before he arrived. That's when Jessica Miller noticed her. Jessica had been working at Bellecourt for 8 months, and she was bitter about everything. Bitter about her tiny apartment, bitter about her student loans, bitter about watching wealthy customers drop more money on wine than she made in a week. At 24, she felt like life had dealt her an unfair hand, while others seemed to coast through on privilege she'd never have. But Jessica's bitterness ran deeper than financial struggles. She'd grown up in a household where certain words were whispered behind closed doors, where her father made comments about people who were different, where she'd learned to see the world through a lens of resentment and prejudice. When Jessica saw Maria sitting alone at the premium corner table, something ugly stirred inside her chest. Here was this woman, clearly pregnant, wearing what looked like $1,000 dress, ordering expensive appetizers without even glancing at the prices. Jessica made assumptions, the kind that revealed everything about her character and nothing about Maria's reality. Maria ordered the grilled salmon with a side salad, asking politely if the fish was fresh. She spoke softly, her voice carrying a slight accent from her childhood in Puerto Rico. She was polite to Jessica, even commenting on how busy the restaurant seemed that evening. But Jessica wasn't interested in pleasantries. She saw what she wanted to see, a woman she believed didn't belong in a place like Bellecourt. Jessica's mind filled with toxic thoughts about welfare queens and people living beyond their means. She never considered that Maria might be a successful business owner herself, or that her husband might have earned every dollar through legitimate hard work. The first sign of trouble came when Jessica delivered Maria's appetizer with unnecessary force, causing the plate to clatter against the table. Maria looked up, startled, but said nothing. She was used to microaggressions, had learned to pick her battles carefully. Then Jessica accidentally bumped into Maria's chair while serving the table behind her. Again, Maria remained calm, though her hand instinctively moved to protect her belly from any jarring motion. The baby was already active tonight, and stress wasn't good for either of them. Other diners began to notice the tension. A couple at a nearby table exchanged glances as they watched Jessica's increasingly hostile behavior. The man leaned toward his wife, and whispered something about getting the manager, but she shook her head, not wanting to get involved in what seemed like a personal dispute. Maria tried to focus on her meal, checking her phone periodically for updates on Vincent's flight. She'd texted him about the delay, and he'd responded with concern about her eating alone. "Order something good," he'd written. "Can't wait to see my beautiful wife and our little princess." The thought of Vincent brought a smile to Maria's face. He'd been so excited about the pregnancy, already talking about converting their spare bedroom into a nursery, researching the best schools in their neighborhood. This baby was their first child together, and Vincent treated Maria like precious cargo, constantly worried about her comfort and health. But Jessica's resentment was building to a breaking point. She watched Maria smile at her phone, watched her order dessert, watched her exist peacefully in a space Jessica believed she had no right to occupy. The thoughts in Jessica's head grew uglier and more violent. When Maria asked for a glass of water to take her prenatal vitamins, Jessica saw her opportunity. She filled a large glass with ice water, her hands trembling slightly with anticipation and malicious intent. This was her moment to put this woman in what she believed was her proper place. Maria was reading a text from Vincent when Jessica approached her table. The message was sweet and loving, Vincent telling her how much he missed her, how he couldn't wait to hold her and feel the baby kick. Maria was typing back when she felt the shock of ice-cold water cascading down her face, soaking through her silk dress, dripping onto her belly. The restaurant fell silent. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence. Every fork froze halfway to waiting mouths. The soft jazz music continued playing, but it felt eerily out of place in the sudden, heavy quiet. Jessica stood over Maria with the empty glass, her face twisted with satisfaction and hate. "Oops," she said, her voice dripping with mock innocence. "Guess I'm just clumsy tonight. Maybe next time you should try eating somewhere more appropriate for people like you." Maria sat frozen, ice water still dripping from her hair onto her ruined designer dress. Her hands moved protectively to her belly, where she could feel the baby moving restlessly, as if sensing her mother's distress. The cold water had shocked her system, and she worried about the sudden temperature change affecting the pregnancy. For a moment, Maria couldn't breathe. The humiliation was overwhelming, not just because of the water, but because of the words, the hatred behind them, the public nature of the attack. She'd experienced racism before, but never so blatantly, never while she was pregnant and vulnerable. The other diners stared, some pulling out phones to record, others looking away in embarrassment. Nobody stood up to help. Nobody called out Jessica's behavior. They all just watched as a pregnant woman sat soaking wet and humiliated in one of the city's finest restaurants. But what Jessica didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Maria's phone was buzzing with an incoming call. Vincent's name lit up the screen as his plane touched down early at O'Hare Airport. Maria's trembling fingers reached for her phone as Vincent's name flashed across the screen. Her voice cracked as she answered, water still dripping from her hair onto the white tablecloth below. "Vincent, she whispered, her words barely audible over the restaurant's stunned silence. "Maria? Baby, what's wrong? You sound upset." Vincent's voice carried that immediate shift from casual to protective that happened whenever he sensed something was off with his wife. Jessica stood nearby, still holding the empty glass, completely unaware that she'd just sealed her own fate. She was actually smiling, feeling proud of what she'd done, thinking she'd taught some entitled woman a lesson about knowing her place. Maria looked up at Jessica, then around at all the staring faces. The phones pointed in her direction, the complete lack of anyone coming to her defense. Her voice grew steadier, colder. "Someone just dumped ice water all over me because of the color of my skin." The line went completely silent for 3 seconds that felt like an eternity. When Vincent spoke again, his voice had dropped to a tone that would have terrified anyone who truly knew him. "Where are you right now?" "Bellacourt. Our table. Don't move, I'm 15 minutes away." Maria ended the call and slowly stood up, water cascading from her dress onto the marble floor. She reached into her purse with shaking hands and pulled out exact change for her untouched meal, placing it carefully on the table. Then she added something that made Jessica's eyes widen, a tip that was larger than most people's entire dinner bill. "I'm going to wait outside for my husband," Maria said quietly, her voice carrying a weight that made everyone in earshot lean forward to listen. "He'll want to discuss this situation with management." Jessica laughed, a sound that would haunt her later. "Your husband? What's he gonna do? File a complaint?" Maria's eyes met Jessica's for one long moment. There was no anger there, no tears, just a quiet certainty that made something cold crawl up Jessica's spine. "You'll find out soon enough." As Maria walked toward the exit, her wet heels clicking against the floor, Jessica turned to her co-workers with a triumphant grin. "Finally put that woman in her place," she said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Some people need to learn where they belong." But her hands were shaking as she cleaned up the spilled water, and she couldn't quite meet the eyes of the other staff members who were staring at her with expressions ranging from shock to disgust. Outside, Maria stood under the restaurant's elegant awning, her designer dress ruined, her carefully styled hair dripping wet. She placed both hands on her belly, feeling the baby's anxious movements. The stress was making her feel nauseous, and she worried about the effect this trauma might have on her pregnancy. A black SUV pulled up to the curb exactly 14 minutes later. Vincent Santos stepped out, and anyone watching would have immediately understood that this was not a man to be trifled with. He moved with the controlled precision of someone accustomed to command, his expensive suit tailored perfectly, his eyes scanning the area with the awareness of someone who'd learned to always watch his surroundings. But when he saw Maria standing there, water stains covering her dress, mascara smudged under her eyes, something fundamental shifted in his expression. The powerful businessman disappeared, replaced by a husband whose pregnant wife had been attacked. "Baby," he said softly, pulling her into his arms despite her wet clothes. "Are you hurt? Is the baby okay?" Maria broke down then, sobbing against his chest as months of accumulated stress from small acts of discrimination finally poured out. "She called me names, Vincent. She said I didn't belong there, in front of everyone, and nobody said anything. They just watched." Vincent held her carefully, his jaw clenching as he felt her body shake with sobs. Over her shoulder, he could see into the restaurant's large windows, where diners were still pointing and whispering. His eyes found Jessica, who was now serving another table, apparently having moved on from her act of cruelty without a second thought. "Get in the car," Vincent said gently, helping Maria into the passenger seat. "I need to handle something." Maria grabbed his hand. "Vincent, please. I just want to go home. I don't want any trouble." Vincent's voice was soft when he spoke to his wife, but his eyes remained fixed on the restaurant. "There won't be any trouble, love. I'm just going to have a conversation." He kissed her forehead tenderly. "Lock the doors. I'll be right back." Vincent walked into Bellacourt like he owned the place, which, as it turned out, he very nearly did. Through a complex web of shell companies and business partnerships, Vincent's construction firm had built this restaurant 5 years ago. His security company provided services for the building. His real estate investments included the parking structure next door. The maître d' approached nervously. "Sir, do you have a reservation? I need to speak with the owner. Now." Something in Vincent's tone made the maître d' step back. "Mr. Castellano is in his office. May I ask what this is regarding?" "Tell him Vincent Santos is here about a problem with his staff." The name meant nothing to the maître d', but within 2 minutes, Anthony Castellano emerged from the back office, his face pale with recognition. Everyone in the restaurant business knew Vincent Santos, even if they'd never met him personally. His reputation preceded him in circles where reputation meant everything. "Vincent," Anthony said, extending his hand with nervous energy. "What brings you here tonight?" Vincent didn't shake the offered hand. "Your waitress just racially attacked my pregnant wife. poured water on her, called her names, humiliated her in front of your entire dining room. Anthony's face went white. Which waitress? Vincent's eyes found Jessica, who was laughing at something a coworker had said, completely oblivious to the storm heading her way. The blonde one. Corner section. Anthony looked across the dining room, his stomach dropping as he realized the magnitude of what had just happened. Vincent Santos wasn't just any customer. He was connected to people who could make or break businesses with a phone call, and someone had just attacked his family. Vincent, I am so deeply sorry. This is absolutely unacceptable. Let me handle this immediately. But Vincent held up a hand. No, I want to talk to her myself, face to face. Anthony's voice dropped to an urgent whisper. Vincent, please, let me fire her quietly. We don't need a scene. Vincent's smile was cold enough to freeze blood. Oh, Anthony, there's not going to be a scene. I'm just going to introduce myself. Vincent approached Jessica's section with the measured stride of a man who'd learned that power whispers while weakness shouts. Every step he took across that marble floor carried the weight of connections that ran deeper than most people could imagine. Jessica was busy wiping down a table, humming softly to herself, still riding the high of what she believed was her moment of triumph. Excuse me, Vincent said, his voice calm and controlled. Jessica turned around, and for the first time that night, her confident smirk faltered. Standing before her was a man who radiated authority in a way that made her instinctively step backward. His suit probably cost more than she made in 3 months, but it wasn't the clothes that unsettled her. It was the way he looked at her, like he could see straight through to her soul and found it lacking. Can I help you? Jessica managed, her voice suddenly smaller than it had been all evening. I'm Vincent Santos. The pregnant woman you just attacked is my wife. The words hit Jessica like a physical blow. Her face went through a series of expressions, confusion, recognition, and then pure terror as the reality of her situation began to dawn on her. The empty water glass she'd been holding slipped from her fingers, shattering against the floor with a sound that seemed to echo throughout the suddenly quiet restaurant. I don't know what you're talking about, Jessica stammered, but her voice cracked on every word. Vincent's expression didn't change. You dumped ice water on a pregnant woman and told her she didn't belong here because of the color of her skin. In front of a room full of people, some of whom recorded it. Jessica's eyes darted around the dining room, suddenly noticing how many phones were still pointed in her direction. The other diners weren't just watching anymore. They were documenting every moment of her downfall. Her legs felt weak, and she had to grip the edge of the table to keep from falling. Sir, I think there's been a misunderstanding, she whispered. The only misunderstanding, Vincent said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, was yours. You looked at my wife and made assumptions about who she was, what she deserved, where she belonged. You decided that the color of her skin gave you permission to humiliate her. Anthony Castellano appeared at Vincent's shoulder, sweat beading on his forehead despite the restaurant's perfect climate control. Vincent, please let me handle this. Jessica, you're fired. Effective immediately. Pack your things and leave. But Vincent held up a hand without taking his eyes off Jessica. No, Anthony. I want her to understand something first. Jessica was trembling now, tears starting to form in her eyes as the full weight of what she'd done crashed down on her. Please, sir. I'm sorry. I was having a bad day and You were having a bad day, Vincent repeated slowly. So you decided to make sure my pregnant wife had a worse one. The restaurant had gone completely silent. Even the kitchen staff had stopped working to watch this confrontation unfold. Jessica could feel dozens of eyes on her, could sense the other waitresses whispering among themselves, could see the disgust on the faces of customers who had witnessed her earlier behavior. Vincent continued, his voice never rising above that controlled, deadly calm tone. Do you know what my wife does for a living, Jessica? Jessica shook her head, not trusting her voice. She's a pediatric nurse. She spends her days taking care of sick children, kids whose parents can't always afford the best care. kids from every background you can imagine. She holds their hands when they're scared, stays late when they need extra attention, never once asks about their insurance or their parents' immigration status or the color of their skin. Each word was like a knife twisting deeper into Jessica's conscience. She tried to speak, but Vincent wasn't finished. My wife volunteers at free clinics on weekends. She's donated more money to children's charities than you'll probably earn in your entire lifetime. She's carrying our first child, and she came here tonight because this is where we had our first date. She wanted to surprise me with dinner at a place that means something to us. Jessica's tears were flowing freely now, mascara running down her cheeks as she realized the magnitude of her cruelty. I didn't know. You didn't want to know, Vincent said, cutting her off. You saw what you wanted to see. A pregnant black woman who you decided didn't deserve respect. Anthony stepped forward again, desperate to defuse the situation. Vincent, I assure you, this will never happen again. We have zero tolerance for this behavior. Vincent finally looked at the restaurant owner, his expression unreadable. Zero tolerance? Then why did it happen at all? Where was your staff when my wife was being attacked? Where was your security? Where was anyone with the basic human decency to step in? Anthony had no answer. The truth was, his staff had been too shocked to react, and his customers had been too uncomfortable to get involved. It was easier to look away, to pretend it wasn't their problem, to let someone else deal with the ugliness of racism. Jessica suddenly found her voice, desperation making her words tumble out in a rush. Mr. Santos, please. I need this job. I have student loans. My rent is due. My mom is sick. I made a terrible mistake, but please don't destroy my life over it. Vincent looked at her for a long moment, and something shifted in his expression. Not softness exactly, but a kind of terrible understanding. You're worried about your life being destroyed over one moment of hatred? Jessica nodded frantically. My wife will remember what you did to her for the rest of her life. Every time she thinks about this pregnancy, about the night she was trying to do something sweet for her husband, she'll remember the feeling of ice water soaking through her dress while a room full of strangers watched her be humiliated. That memory will be with her when our daughter is born, when she takes her first steps, when she starts school. Vincent's voice grew quieter, more intense. You're worried about student loans and rent? My wife is worried about whether the stress you caused tonight might affect our unborn child. She's sitting in my car right now, crying because she's wondering if she did something wrong, if she somehow deserved what you did to her. Jessica was sobbing now, her whole body shaking with the force of her tears. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't undo what you did, Vincent said. Sorry doesn't take back the words you said or the water you poured or the humiliation you caused. Sorry is just a word you're saying because you got caught. The entire restaurant was watching this exchange with a mixture of fascination and horror. This wasn't just about a waitress losing her job. This was about consequences, about accountability, about what happens when hatred meets its match. Vincent pulled out his phone and made a call, speaking quietly for about 30 seconds before hanging up. Jessica watched with growing terror, wondering who he was calling, what he was arranging. Pack your things, Vincent said finally. You're done here. Jessica looked at Anthony, hoping for some kind of intervention, but the restaurant owner just shook his head. There would be no saving her job, no second chances, no explanation that would make this right. As Jessica stumbled toward the staff area to collect her belongings, Vincent called after her. Jessica. She turned back, hope flickering in her tear-filled eyes. The video of what you did is already online. It's spreading across social media. Your name, your face, your actions, they're all out there now. Every future employer, every potential landlord, every person you meet is going to be able to see exactly who you are and what you're capable of. Jessica's face went completely white as the full scope of her situation hit her. In the age of viral videos and internet justice, there was no hiding from what she'd done. Her moment of cruelty had been captured and shared, and it would follow her everywhere. That's the world you created when you decided my wife didn't deserve basic human dignity, Vincent continued. Now you get to live in it. Jessica stumbled toward the back of the restaurant, her legs barely carrying her, as the full weight of her actions crashed down like a tidal wave. Every step felt like walking through quicksand, each breath harder than the last. The other staff members she passed wouldn't meet her eyes. Some shook their heads in disgust. Others whispered among themselves, but none showed her any sympathy. In the employee break room, Jessica's hands shook violently as she tried to gather her belongings from her locker. Her apron, her spare shoes, the photo of her and her mother that she kept taped inside the metal door. Everything felt surreal, like she was watching someone else's life fall apart in slow motion. Her phone buzzed constantly with notifications. Text messages, missed calls, social media alerts. Word was already spreading through her contacts. Friends sending her links to videos that showed her dumping water on Maria, captured from multiple angles by restaurant patrons. The comments were brutal, people calling her every name imaginable, sharing the videos with captions about racist encounters and workplace discrimination. Meanwhile, Vincent walked back outside to check on Maria. She was still sitting in the passenger seat of their SUV, both hands resting on her belly, trying to calm herself and the baby who was moving restlessly inside her. Her beautiful dress was ruined, the expensive silk stained beyond repair, but that wasn't what hurt the most. "How are you feeling?" Vincent asked gently as he slid into the driver's seat. Maria wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "The baby's been kicking non-stop since it happened. I think the stress scared her." Vincent's jaw tightened as he reached over to place his hand on his wife's stomach. He could feel their daughter moving anxiously, and it broke his heart to know that his unborn child had already been affected by someone's hatred. "We should go to the hospital," Vincent said, "just to make sure everything's okay." Maria nodded, fresh tears streaming down her face. "I keep thinking about what she said, about how I don't belong in places like that. Vincent, what if our daughter grows up in a world where people look at her the same way that Waitress looked at me?" Vincent's heart shattered hearing the pain in his wife's voice. This wasn't just about one incident anymore. This was about the fear every parent of color carries, wondering how they can protect their children from a world that sometimes sees them as less than human. "Our daughter is going to grow up knowing she's loved, knowing she's valuable, knowing she belongs anywhere she wants to be," Vincent said firmly. "And if anyone tries to tell her different, they'll have to answer to both of us." Back inside Bella Corte, Anthony Castellano was dealing with the aftermath of the incident. Several tables had already asked for their checks, disgusted by what they'd witnessed. Others were demanding to speak with management, wanting to know how such behavior was tolerated in an establishment of this caliber. "Mr. Castellano," the maitre d'hotel approached nervously. "Channel 7 News is on the phone. They want a statement about the incident, and there are 3 other reporters waiting outside." Anthony rubbed his temples, feeling a massive headache building. In the age of social media, restaurant scandals could destroy businesses overnight. The video of Jessica's attack on Maria was already going viral, with thousands of views and hundreds of angry comments. People were calling for boycotts, leaving negative reviews online, sharing the story across every platform. "Prepare a statement," Anthony told his assistant manager. "We condemn the actions of our former employee in the strongest possible terms. We have zero tolerance for discrimination of any kind, and the individual responsible has been terminated immediately. We are reviewing our hiring and training procedures to ensure this never happens again." But Anthony knew words wouldn't be enough. The damage was done. His restaurant's reputation, built over years of excellent service and fine dining, could be destroyed by one employee's moment of hatred. Jessica emerged from the back room carrying a small box of her personal items. Her face was puffy from crying, her makeup completely ruined. As she walked through the dining room for the last time, conversations stopped. Diners stared at her with expressions ranging from disgust to pity. Some held up their phones, still recording, capturing her walk of shame for posterity. At the host stand, Anthony handed her a final envelope. "Your last paycheck," he said coldly. "And Jessica, if anyone calls for a reference, I'll be honest about why you're no longer employed here." Jessica took the envelope with trembling hands. "Mr. Castellano, please. I know I messed up, but I can't afford to lose this job. My mom needs her medication, and I have bills. You should have thought about that before you decided to attack a customer," Anthony replied sharply. "Your problems don't give you the right to treat other people like garbage." Outside, Jessica stood on the sidewalk in front of Bellacourt, watching Vincent's SUV pull away. The reality of her situation was becoming clearer by the minute. She had no job, no prospects, and thanks to the viral videos, no way to hide from what she'd done. Her phone rang. Her mother. "Jessica, honey, what's this video your sister just sent me? Please tell me that's not you pouring water on that poor pregnant woman." Jessica broke down completely on the sidewalk, sobbing into her phone as she tried to explain to her mother how she'd destroyed her life in a single moment of cruelty. Passers-by gave her a wide berth, some recognizing her from the videos that were still spreading across the internet. Meanwhile, at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, Maria was lying on an examination table while a doctor performed an ultrasound to check on the baby. Vincent held her hand tightly, both of them staring at the monitor showing their daughter moving around in the womb. "Everything looks normal," Dr. Rodriguez said with a smile. "Baby's heartbeat is strong, movement is good. The stress didn't seem to cause any complications, but I'd recommend taking it easy for the next few days." Maria let out a sigh of relief, feeling Vincent squeeze her hand. Their daughter was safe, despite everything that had happened. "Mrs. Santos," the doctor continued, "I have to ask about the incident that brought you in tonight. Have you considered filing a police report? What happened to you was assault, and there may be grounds for criminal charges." Maria looked at Vincent, who nodded grimly. "We'll definitely be exploring all our legal options," he said. By the time they left the hospital, it was nearly midnight. The drive home was quiet, both of them processing the events of the evening. Maria stared out the window at the city lights, one hand resting on her belly, where their daughter continued to move peacefully. Jessica's world crumbled in one night because she chose hatred over humanity. Maria and Vincent's story reminds us that dignity can't be stolen, only revealed. Actions have consequences, and in today's connected world, those consequences follow you everywhere. What started as one woman's prejudice became a lesson in justice that millions witnessed. Respect isn't about status or wealth. It's about recognizing the humanity in every person you meet. Share this story if you believe everyone deserves basic human dignity.